Hello, welcome to Books and Booze. I'm your host, Alex. It's good to see you. This time, I will be talking about Interior Chinatown by Charles Yu. Also this time, I will be having a Negroni. It's the perfect summer drink if you've never had one. This is actually one that my lovely bride, my wife, gave me all the ingredients for a while back. If I can find the recipe for it, I'll link it in the description. It's from Death & Company. It's a Negroni that they add port wine to. It's stupid good. So yeah. And I know I'm supposed to have an orange in this. Don't. It's still delicious without it. So why does it matter? But yeah, Interior Chinatown. This was on my radar because it had a lot of buzz. Especially once it kind of got, this little National Book Award on it. And I added it to my list because it was claimed to be sci-fi, and I don't know if that's necessarily true. Maybe sci-fi light or sci-fi adjacent would be more apt. I would not describe this as being similar to something like Dune or a Ken Stanley Robbins book, for example. But it has some sci-fi components to it and sort of the ridiculous setup that it has. So this is a satire, and it is quite funny at times. But this is a satire that focuses around a character named Willis Wu, who lives in this constructed Chinatown that is also a procedural cop drama that's going on with everyone's lives at the same time. So these characters for the cop drama action adventure show called Black and White, which follows a black cop and a white cop, just exist around these people's lives, and they play characters in them. Willis Wu is aspiring to become Kung Fu guy during this sort of life within a TV show setting, but often he's just like background Oriental guy. And he keeps trying to rise the ranks, finding the perfect opportunity to showcase his kung fu skills that he's been honing, ultimately trying to find meaning in his life that otherwise feels meaningless. And there are some complications that make the story interesting, such as namely romance, and of course the show not always going as planned or as intended. Yeah, it gets a little bit spicy here and there. So as I said, this isn't really sci-fi, but it kind of has that sci-fi component, the idea that these characters are subjugated or willingly put into this constructed space in which they are also entertainment objects. They're objects for entertainment. And more specifically, they are background objects for entertainment, all right? They're not even the main stars, which is what Willis ultimately wants, is this one niche in which an Asian American specifically can become relevant to the show, in his eyes at least. The book follows this format where it often looks like a screenplay, and with stage directions, with where the setting is, with specific characters' names appearing above their dialogue. It reads like a screenplay, which leads into this theme of performance that I think Charles Yu was very focused on and very intent about addressing. And to be honest, this isn't my usual cup of tea. I'm not used to reading, honestly, a very hopeful satire. This book is very hopeful. I do appreciate that about it. Very hopeful satire. The screenplay leads to very different pacing than I'm used to, kind of long, drab, stone cold sentences about like someone trying to find God in a car crash or something awful and weird like that. That's usually my cup of tea. But this was a welcome change of pace once I could finally get into the pacing that the screenplay format forces you to go into. And what I think's interesting too is that this book is it's focused around performance, but it's also focused around media. I mean, you are literally seeing an active role in media production, consumption, and how it's influencing these characters' lives. And I think what Charles Yu wants to get at here is that media, to some degree, imposes certain performances on us. And at the same time, we perpetuate those performances and ideas. And I was listening to a talk that Charles Yu gave with Google, of all people. but he did a talk with Google. I'll link to it in the description. It's a nice little conversation. He definitely believes that media is sort of this two-way street, and I do as well. So I appreciate that not only is he saying it in this interview, but I think the book, the novel, lends credence to the idea that media is this two-way street that we have an active role in, that it's not necessarily going to influence us constantly, but if we can become aware of it, become aware of our role in media consumption, our role in how media influences us, that we can start to control it and kind of change it for the better. And honestly, you push us this idea that performance, whether it's subjugated by media or not, is everywhere. Notably, in this book, it boils down to fatherhood and family. There's certain performances and certain roles later in the novel that come out are linked to fatherhood, and I thought that was kind of interesting. And another interesting choice that Yu makes is that there are portions of the novel which are not written in the screenplay format, hints indicating to us that this is not a performance. This is not something that is predetermined by media, by the superstructure, that these characters are then acting out, but rather they're being genuine, and this is who they are. And notably that occurs with Willis and his romance with Karen. I love the idea that romance and love seems to sort of break down this idea that you had to perform in a certain way. I love that. I think that's especially true for my own life. I certainly maybe perform in some avenues, but when it comes to my marriage, there's not putting on airs or a performance that occurs there. And honestly, yeah, it's an enjoyable read that I think, has a strange pacing for me personally, because I'm just not used to reading something in this format, but it then leads itself to, I think, very great commentary on the idea of performance and taking ownership over that and being conscious and aware of performance and how media is influencing us. And if there's any criticisms I have toward the book, they would definitely occur toward the end of it. Specifically, there's this court sequence in which I think I hate to use the word preachy, but it gets very direct. And it kind of starts to just straight up tell you what this novel has been about, that it's about this idea of performance. It's about our role with media and adopting performances and what we do with those. And specifically in regards to race in this instance, to Asian Americans. I just wasn't really a fan of it. I felt like I as the reader could have gotten that just from reading the narrative so far. And to be honest, yes, it makes sense in the context of what's occurring, that these characters would be very direct in stating what they're stating. It also acts as a really great history lesson. But at the same time, I feel like the novel itself was already leading to that. I was already getting that, and that I was more interested in the resolution of relationships that comes shortly after this courtroom sequence in the later part of the book. Yeah, I gotta say I enjoyed this overall, and I read it really fast, and that's not just because it reads fast. I mean, it's a pretty thick boy right there. I just enjoyed it. I couldn't put it down. I was very invested in this character, very invested in the very strange predicament in which he's in with this procedural cop drama show, and his association with it, and how he's finding value in these performances and these specifically mediated performances, and just wanting to see him break free of that. And ultimately, that's what the novel goes toward. And I have to appreciate Charles Yu. He's very optimistic in this novel, and you just don't come across that very much. The idea that we can tear down these signifiers, these boundaries that we put up specifically with this book in regards to race, that we can tear those down and we can just start seeing each other as humans, or even something sort of beyond that. And I really appreciate that in his writing. I'm reading this, I'm reminded of a Kurt Vonnegut quote. It goes something along the lines of that we all pretend to be something, so you have to be very careful with what you pretend to be. And I think Charles Yu would agree with that to a certain degree. So yeah, I gotta say, I really dug Interior Chinatown. Excellent read. It's easy read. You don't have to, if you're doing it for the summer, I would encourage, you can read this on the beach or something like that. So yeah, go pick it up, and salute to Charles Yu. If you have read this book, if you have read Interior Chinatown, if you got something different from it, please let me know. Please let me know what you think about in the comments below, what you think about this idea of performance and mediated performances and our relationship to media. Do you also think, like me and Charles Yu, that it's kind of this two-way street? There's a very active role that we can take on in being aware of what we consume and how we let it influence us. I would love to know what you think about that in the comments below, and we can start a dialogue. And if you dig content like this, please please go check out some of my video essays. If you're looking for insights and wisdom from literature and art, please subscribe to the channel so that you can join me up on further reviews and further explorations. But until then, yeah, see ya.